Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Turner. I'm a tutor at the Writing Center at Old Dominion University, and today's presentation is about logic and fallacies. It's a two-part presentation, so if this subject matter interests you, please tune in again next week for the second half. Our goals for today's presentation are to, first of all, make sure that you can define a fallacy at the end. Second, I'd like you to be able to discuss with a sense of familiarity the common types of fallacies. And lastly, I'd like you to be able to recognize fallacies, one, so you can avoid using the fallacies in your own arguments, and second, so you can rebut the fallacious arguments of others. What is a fallacy? Well, this is a formal philosopher's definition of a fallacy, and that's pretty intense for what we're going to be discussing today. So here's sort of a working definition of what we'll be doing. A fallacy today is any thinking or reasoning in an argument which renders the argument untrue. What are the different types of fallacies? Well, they can sort of be confusing because oftentimes they go by different names, and that may depend on what subject you're studying. And then in addition to that, each subject may have its own subgroup or subcategory of fallacies. And this is a short list of those different types of fallacies. I've tried to condense the list a little bit so that there's no redundancy, and then the ones in parentheses are same names or different names for the same fallacy. Of course, we won't be talking about all of those fallacies today. What fallacies will we be talking about? Well, we'll just talk about the most common types, and those generally fall into two categories: evasions and oversimplifications. We'll talk about evasions today. We'll save oversimplifications for next week. What is an evasion? Well, it's basically avoiding arguing the substantive matters of the argument itself. Literally, you're avoiding the subject matter of the argument. Those fall into 6 common categories: begging the question, non sequitur, an inappropriate appeal, an ad hominem attack, straw man argument, or a slippery slope argument. Begging the question. Well, this one can be sort of a brain twister to start with, but the basic gist of this is that we all start an argument with some sort of given circumstances, but we assume those and we don't necessarily include them in the argument. Notice how begging the question assumes the given and immediately uses it as part of its argument without recognizing that it may not be entirely credible. Non sequitur. Well, this one is actually sort of silly, and this form is actually equivocation. The building is huge, and the people who live there must be giants. Well, that's not necessarily true at all, and in fact, they're probably not any bigger than normal people. In fact, maybe the way you defeat this argument is just by pointing out, well, yeah, the building's huge, but maybe there is a whole bunch of apartments inside of it. Inappropriate appeal. Well, there are actually several different forms of that: snob appeal, appeal to authority, flattery, argument to the people, or bandwagon. The 2 examples I've given you are, one is of a snob appeal, and the second is appeal to authority. An ad hominem attack. We see this one really commonly in politics. It really just means that instead of making an argument about the substance of the debate, that you're attacking the person. And instead of making the argument, you try to discredit the person, which then discredits their argument. Obviously, that's a fallacy. Straw man. This is almost a version of ad hominem, but instead of attacking the person, you really distort their argument or misrepresent their argument so that it makes it sound like they're arguing for something different than they are. And it's an evasion by distraction, really. Slippery slope. This one's actually really common, arguing that by doing this one thing, it will lead to a never-ending set of undesirable consequences that won't necessarily take place. If you have any questions about today's presentation, feel free to come by the Learning Commons and make an appointment, or feel free to give us a call. These are our hours, And of course, these sorts of questions may be really well suited for the writing lab hours. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for stopping by. These are my references. I hope you take a chance to peruse them. They really do have a lot of great information. Take care.